Hi there, Randy Green here. You are listening to a HAL Project podcast. And as always, we are traveling between past, present, and future to figure out what is the next step of our human evolution. And what are we to do, those of us who have decided to join the fifth cycle and move into the next step of the human progression journey into higher awareness as well as new consciousness potentials. That's going to be a bit of a journey and a process that those of us who are embarking on that and to have something to compare with, we could say that since 25,000 years ago, give or take. I know science tells you differently because of the little ice age and what we have had going there, but we don't really pay much attention to what the historians and what scientists are coming up with because they have, of course, their understanding of things as they work within their paradigm. And we're working within a different paradigm where we understand that alien technology, time travel, different dimensions and other types of energies and reality programs and constructions of worlds and things are possible that science will tell us is not possible. So we are not clinging on to dates and whenever that was and whatever has been interpreted to be due to the carbon-14 dating and what have you. And also the fact that whatever they are building their sciences on when we talk anthropology is based upon bones and what they have found in the soil. And the lighter materials has deteriorated a long time ago and only the heavy ones are left. So we don't really know what they are finding, whether or not that is actually a representation of the different colonies of humans that were on our planet, or if they're only finding what remains of the Neanderthal projects, which were a project on the Nuburians. Anyways, we're just putting that into a context. So whenever I say something, trying to date something, it's not the date that is important. It is the effects of it that plays in here. We have had some pretty huge shift in our reality since 2011, and we have had different agendas and different factions coming and going. Each and one of them have had their own plans with humanity and our solar system. And those of us who have reported it has reported it diligently as in kind of now this is happening and this is happening and then something else is happening. And at the end of the day, it just becomes one long line of information of disasters, which most people eventually just grow tired of because, yeah, they said we're going to have a pole shift in 2012. That didn't happen, right? But then the explanation was because someone else came in and intervened, alien technology, what have you. And those of us who are seeing on the other dimensions, we are seeing this coming and going of factions fighting each other, having different wars in different adjacent realities on different levels. And it's complex to live in these very shifting realities where we are still lodged into a physical reality where everything seems and appears to be the same day in and day out. Whether it is or not, or we've been brainwashed to see it that way, that is the question we need to ask ourselves, because with all the things that are going on around us, it's amazing that our world is still standing, let me put it that way, but that could be due to the programs and the very solidified type of energies that we have, including the fact that realities and their life forms are playing in together, and we are having animals and birds and bees and bugs and what have you that are coded and engineered and linked up to specific cube programs that keeps them stuck in a specific perception of reality. So they are all keeping our world as it is, including humans that are being brainwashed to, again, programs and cubes and link up and field control that allows them to only perceive one level of reality and at the same time keeping it a steady state. They are upholding the Truman Show. As long as that's going on, then things will remain as they are. But we are facing different times now because we could say these programs and alien technology were kept up by the parallel universal matrix that had an interest in keeping our world as it is because they wanted to continue some of their genetic harvesting programs using the grays and the adjacent fourth dimension and some of the different covert military operations and what have you that's been going on here, both since the 50s, but as far back as this human form has existed, all the way back to the Neanderthal projects, which seeded in the possibility of creating organic forms that were linked up to controlled technologies. So with that one put in, we can also say, well, what is the shift then? The great shift is that the parallel universal matrix in the beginning of the year, I've explained that in the whole perception logs, because I shared the information I got while it was happening, and I chose not to bring it out here on YouTube, because as always, we never really know what we get of information, if it's something that will stick or if it's just temporary and it's just one faction that is doing things, and they always make it appear as if it's the global thing that's going on, when in fact it's just a minor faction that is doing something, but each and one of them have a very prominent and strong type of energy. So therefore, those of us who are picking up on this are always picking up on it as if it's the landslide of change that is going to happen when they pull out or this happens or what have you. But because I've been observing these things since 2007, technically, I am not impressed, and I'm just kind of saying, yeah, as long as there are humans out there walking in their daydream and keeping up the reality as it is because they're linked up to the old technologies, well, this world will remain as it is until it literally falls apart, and then we will see something that is very, very unpleasant as the hologram dissipates because humans are no longer upholding it. So that's for the next generations, as the original version of our planet will begin to bleed through. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when I was a kid, I used to have dreams of being in a house, and on one side, the front, I was seeing green lawns, and on the back side, I was seeing kind of a landscape as if someone had dropped several bombs and it was bombed out and buildings were falling apart, and it was not a good place to be. So that's kind of what I already got as a kid. This is the world you live in. Your house is your personality matrix, and it's kept up by different forms of technology. So when you look forward, you are seeing that world out there. But the matter of the fact is that everything on it is kept up by artificial programs. So that will be what we will see as environmental changes and terraforming and all these things as we will resume to the state our planet actually is in, which is going to be interesting, as well as how does our solar system actually look? Are we, what we're looking at, will it change because the sun is no longer holding density 2 energies and now only hold density 1, which are what we call atoms and electromagnetic frequencies? So what does that mean? Will that change the way the planets look? Will that change the configuration of them? And all these kind of weird questions that we're going to have. So we don't really know if it's the program that breaks down and then the true version of it will appear, or if it's because of the changes of the energies, because of the shutting down of the sun that no longer holds what we call higher dimensional energy, but only holds the energies that are a part of what remains of the timeline event energies density 1. So with that one in mind, we also know, okay, changes are definitely coming on a physical level, however they may appear, and we can only speculate. And those who are very fear-based and are driven by what we could call the demons of disaster, they will see all sorts of disasters coming in the future because that's what they are projecting into their timelines and what they want it to be. And others are a little bit more kind of, yeah, everything changes, right? So we'll deal with it and we'll figure out how to deal with it. And this is some of the things that the Forerunners are going to be part of, as we are going to be the carriers of the visions of the future and knowing this is where it leads to and how can we effectively do something to change that. Knowing the abilities and the powers that we technically have to travel on timelines, to work with timelines, to alter timelines, to jump timelines, to alter our energy system, to connect to different dimensions, to figure out which races are actually the ones we're supposed to work with and which ones are we not supposed to work with. And right now, it does not look good when we talk about the ones that we could have worked with, because most of these pulled out in the 90s and during the stellar activation cycle because of the sun that shut down, that kind of closed that door of other density 2 races and their involvement in our solar system, simply because we have been pushed into what we call the outskirts of our galaxy. And our galaxy, on top of that, in 2017, were linked up to the Dark Avatar Collective. So it doesn't really hold much future, these solar systems. That's part of the pioneers as well, as in kind of trying to engineer and create and become the architects of, okay, how are we going to create a future where humans will be able to either shift between dimensions or travel to other systems. So there is both the mechanical part of it, there is also the consciousness, energy, psychic, energetic, as I call it, side of things. So we're going to have two lineages, main lineages of pioneers, the ones that are going to work on sciences and technology within the framework of what we call the base program, and others that are going to work beyond that. And I am a representative of the ones that are going beyond that, the psychic, energetic, fifth cycle, original version of humanity that is divided in two groups, the humanoids and the true humans. And we're not many true humans left. So it will mainly be within the group of humanoids, because they have had what we could say the main focus of the different races that have been here, because the races that have been here have been of humanoid origin and not of the true humans. The true humans technically were excluded from this universal sector during or after the timeline event. And when I say excluded, not by a choice, but simply because the energies during the timeline event altered this state of this universal structure to such a degree that the true human races no longer could be here. But as I also explained in the whole perception logs, we tried very hard to rearrange and create restoration programs and do what was necessary to create an energy system, a reality field, working with the Pleiadians and some of the old types of Sirians to figure out how to solve that issue within this reality. And that's some of the things and some of the sciences I touch ground with in the whole transition science classes, which you'll find on my websites under the progression work. So I made all the sciences behind what I'm talking about here. And of course, it's up to you if you want to know these sciences or if you just trust what you get from within. So back to the parallel universal matrix. So with that little context in play, with the sun shutting down, the parallel universal matrix decided it was more prosperous for them to travel back in time and complete their fourth cycle before the fall of Atlantis, which meant that they pulled everything out and went back in time and completed their fourth cycle in the solar system before the fall of Atlantis. So that means the last part of what has kept our reality up and running. And I'm not saying the parallel universal matrix is a good thing, not at all, because they wanted to harvest and do all sorts of stupid stuff that were in line with the hijackers and their projects here. And that's why they wanted to keep it running. But due to the issues of the different, with the sun no longer providing what we call density 2 energies, and the gridworks and networks that belong to density 2, by that stop being fueled, that pushed us further into the abyss and further into the old first, second, and third cycle of the races and grids that used to be part of our planet after the timeline event, which most of you know is the underworld. So that's the old racial grids that are coming to life. And with the sun no longer holding the opposition, we are now effectively plunging back in time into these older timelines, which means that people that are not capable of transforming their energy system and maintaining themselves, they will be effectively linked closer and closer to these first, second, and third cycle energies, as well as the now depleted and beginning to wear out fourth cycle, which those of you who have eyes to see with, you can see humans around you are beginning to wear out in some sort. They are looking more and more like shells, and that's because what has been fueling them, which were the parallel universal matrix, no longer is fueling them. So they will get depleted, and as the more depleted they get, they will no longer produce the fourth cycle energetic parasites, which is kind of a good thing, right? So there will not be that many jumpers of the artificial fourth dimension as we've been struggling with since 2016. So that's a good thing. The bad side of that one is that they will then be linked up to the older levels of their DNA that belongs to the first and second and third cycle, and that's the underworld. So that's not a good place to go. So we will see people begin to play out things that we have not had here since the Dark Middle Ages. So, which technically was what was the plague that's ended up with that one. Not that I'm saying we're going to have a plague, but with these old levels of our reality, we will begin to see different forms of viruses that will come back to life, which we're already seeing that are part of the second and the first cycle after the timeline event, where the original human and humanoid genetics mutated and began creating all sorts of creatures that were not supposed to be there originally, but because of the reversal of the genetic structure, it began to literally create jumpers of all sorts of energetic parasites. So that's part of it. So that's the foundation of some of the things that we are going to see, including the different, as we know, the different experimentation that is done by science on all the types of DNA that they are finding in the soil, because the glaciers or the ice is melting. So they find old animals and old corpses of animals that used to live a long time ago that died of these different diseases. The ice age were put there for a reason. So with the ice gone, that means that all of these old collective fields will come to life as science are activating this type of DNA to try to figure out what it's made of. In the name of science, they are reviving something that should have remained dead and should have remained under ice until it no longer had a field that could fuel it. So we are having on many levels different type of old versions of DNA that's going to activate. So that's some of the things that we're going to struggle with as well. So this is why when we talk about, okay, why do we need to shift into the fifth cycle? Not that it's a particularly better place. Don't go with the sales pitch of this is the beautiful house on the beach where the sun is shining all day, because it's not. But it does not have the same connection to the second and the first cycle. It is closely connected to the third cycle, which goes with the AI and the machine worlds and the transhuman agenda. So that's the kind of the problem that is with that one. And some of the older forces that well, those of you who have the eyes to hear with, right? And the ears to see with, yes, you will know what that means, what the fifth dimension actually holds and what the implications of that. And that will be linking up to the Dark Avatar Collective. They are the rulers of the third cycle. So that would be for those who have the ability to work with polarity forces. That's where we're heading now. Whereas in the fourth cycle, it was the opposition that all went with, strive to create harmony with the heart field. We are now entering into the activation processes of the mind field. And whatever that means, and whatever that applies, and whatever that, however that unfolds. So the pioneers, sorry about that. The pioneers are either going to do the scientific way, which we know all will lead to the mechanical standpoint of technology. And then we are the forerunners that are trying to do whatever we can to resume as much of the original fifth cycle of our solar system, which of course is not going to be a success whatsoever, but the attempt should be made no matter what, as a polarity to the highly strong. It's wrong. I was going to say something else, but I don't know how to put it in words. So I'm just going to say that very high potential of the Dark Avatar Collective. We still need people who are carrying the original fifth cycle light to be a counterforce to the fifth cycle. And the fifth cycle Dark Avatar that are in the 3-5 configuration goes back to the timeline event and some of the things that happened there. And it is all due to the Syrian genetics that were highly infected by the timeline event. So these are also historical facts to talk about in both my books as well as in the whole perception logs. For those of you who have read The Souls of Humanity, Modern History, Torology, Understanding the Old Stellar Souls, and reconstruction of the planetary soul, as well as the whole philosophy book, I highly recommend that you do the whole perception logs, because there I give an update on my books. Instead of writing a new book, I've made the whole perception logs as in kind of reviewing everything and rounding it up into kind of where are we now and how we're going to use this and how we're going to use this information when we're heading to the 2025 timeline, which most of us that are doing the fifth cycle are the one that we need to get on board. So that's the 2025 timeline. That is where we could say the final date on the old world order is there. It's due to the 100-year cycle that the planetary hierarchy made in 1925. and their plan of how they were going to activate humanity, which did not go well because of what happened in the 1950s and the incoming of the different races that came here in the 1950s that kind of counteracted all of that activation potential and led humanity somewhere else. And there is no doubt whatsoever that the different secret military operations that took part of these projects worldwide, they are to blame for this failure of the activation of humanity, because they sided up with races that were under the Dark Avatar Collective. So that was the whole purpose of the 1950 incoming races that came in their unidentified flying objects, as was seen in the sky in 1952 and onwards, as the other races pulled out that have been here for a long time and also been seen by humans, but were operating under what we could call different agreements between the races that have been here since the hijacking and before that, always been present on our planet. So it's nothing new. It's not something that happened in the 50s, but in the 50s, other groups came in that were absolutely not interested in keeping anything whatsoever of humanity playing inside the solar system. They literally wanted to acquire it for their own purposes and get rid of humans. Anyways, that's not going to happen as they foresaw either, because our world is a quite complex world, and it's built upon some pretty complex technologies as well as its original purpose that keeps coming in the way of these different races. And those of us who are going to do the Forerunner into the 2025 timelines using the progression dynamics, we will use the original restoration program as well as the original ways of transforming energy and clearing our consciousness unit from the infectious state. And that's how I'm going to continue the work that I am doing to the best of my abilities, as long as I am allowed to do so, to put it that way. So with the parallel universal matrix pulling out of the fourth cycle is now collapsing as well. So that means that this world that we know has begun its changes, and it's just a matter of time before it will be seen and felt within the general population. And then the question is, how will they respond to it? Will they even be just the worst case scenario, if they're completely taken over by different old cycle entities? Will they even be able to do anything about it? The New Order of the Ages that left America in 2016, they foresaw that no matter whatever was going to happen, it would not come into any success whatsoever. So they took off and literally transferred all of their projects into the parallel universal matrix instead of completing it here. So that's also some things that's been going on. So that does not leave much for us to work with. In a way, you could say, well, that frees us to do what we need to do, but not really, because the technologies are still there, which I explain in the whole advanced clearing work, where I show and explain how all of these technologies are still keeping our energy systems controlled and under control, which prevents us from doing what we need to do. So we need to learn how to remove that if we are to do the timeline jump. So this is also part of the Forerunners that are willing to begin that very difficult job of not only dealing with and transforming what is left of the first and second and third cycle, because that will be part of the collective, so that will influence us as well, but we are also dealing with clearing out the fourth cycle technologies and what are left of remnants there, jump into the ability to transform our energy system, our consciousness units and our energy units, and lift it up into the fifth cycle, where we are effectively and scientifically working with timelines to try to create some sort of future is the wrong word, because there is not much future left in the solar system, but we could say a future that will lead for the possibility of as many as possible to do the transition out of this solar system, whether it will be in crafts or in spaceships, or doing the leaving as what we call the remains of genetic material using the old gate systems, or we are capable of shedding off our form and leave through the gate systems in our light bodies, or however we're going to do this. This is going to be what we could call the great and final leaving and shutting down this reality field with everything that's in it, and then it will be consumed by the Dark Avatar Collective. And that is the future. But there is another thing I want to bring into this context, that many of you that are listening to this, you will get this slight feeling of panic, and you will kind of say, well, that's not good news, is it, Randy? But that's because I've chosen here, I've talked about it in the perception logs, and I talked about it other places. I chose not to share it out on YouTube because I didn't want to kind of, if it were pure manipulation. You see, this is one of the invading strategies from the races that have been here, planting certain ideas in our minds and then get us on board that artificial reality and artificial timeline, so we're not really observing what's going on. So in this game, we need to have the mind of a warrior. So the pioneers will be warriors. Don't fool yourself. You're not a light worker. You're not a warrior of light. Don't get in on board with that one, because that's part of what we call the agenda of the false light, which are most people that are in the heavy end of the alien agenda know as the fallen angelics. And there is out there on YouTube and on other people that are getting information, the talk that some of these the archangels are leaving. And you know me, I'm not buying into these. There have been saviors on the planet, and different races have come here to try and help humanity. For me, these are what's called middle domain races that got stuck here in the Middle Ages, where we had the angelic wars, and the angelic wars are the middle domain wars that were between the mammal avians, that are hybrid projects between mammal races, humanoid races, and angelic, what we call avian races or features that were creating what we call as angelic humans, right? And they have been here for a long time. Prior to that, because we have heard of them in the ancient text material where we have humans with wings, right? So they have been here for quite some time. But the fallen angelics got stuck here in the angelic wars, where some of them actually got killed here and got stuck on the inner realities. Not able to have physical form here because their form is middle domain, so they were not capable of having an outer domain type of form, but they could definitely influence different people that were susceptible for their impressions and their energies and linking up to them as their guides and what have you. So that's my version of it. So what has happened is that their leader, which did not die here but kept himself shining and beautiful and all of these kind of things. His name is HAL, and he kept himself, not Belial, because part of the Baals, that's the Niburian version of it, but HAL, which were kind of a different branch of these mammal avians. Or angelic humans, you can call them whatever you want. And he and his groups, because he became their self-announced leader, he was actually what you would call a commander of some of the angelic factions that came here. And if you ask me, well, did they came in the angelic wars to help humanity? No, that's one of the, again, another one of the stupid wars of different groups coming here, try to create or take or get or what have you. And some of them were under what we could call, working with some of the other factions. They were, what do you call it? Soldiers for hire. That's the way. Mercenaries. They were soldiers for hire. They were mercenaries. They were hired by different groups that wanted to invade our planet. And that's what the angelic wars were. And some of the other levels of the middle domain races, we fought hard, because I remember that war. So we fought hard, and we did get them. We did take them out. And many of these came from the fourth and the fifth cycle of their realities. And some of them got stuck here, both in the fifth cycle or fifth domain or fifth level of reality, or however you want to put this. I don't want to use the words dimensions because that's not accurate, but we could call it that, because they used the fifth dimension under the different groupings of the Syrians to get into this reality in their crafts and the different advanced type of realities. Whereas the fourth cycle more came in through the middle domain and used some of the old gate systems. And the fourth cycle version of them under HAL got stuck here, and he kept himself in the fourth cycle in adjacent reality. And the rest kind of lost their bodies here and got stuck, and have now been circulating as attachments within humanity with those who had what we call similar type of avian mammal genetics, from where they could latch on and keep themselves alive. So that's how I see the quote-unquote guardians and quote-unquote archangels and the whole manifestation of these from the middle domain showing themselves a holographic overlay can easily be created by alien technology. So I'm not very impressed with this whole archangel story thing that's going on. The matter of the fact is that since the parallel universal matrix is pulled out, we are now getting in from the fifth cycle of the parallel Earth, which is one of the older types of Earth. Earth was originally divided in 3 Earths: future Earth, the current Earth we are on, and past Earth. And past Earth are lost worlds. Future Earth is what I now call parallel Earth because it technically is positioned in the future. And they are definitely humans from the future. They are enhanced. And they are from a different type of fifth cycle that divided during the time of Atlantis. Anyways, these are all just how do you perceive history and how do you perceive these kind of things. Either way, since the parallel universal matrix pulled out, and the parallel universal matrix does not belong to our solar system, but we're part of the hijacking races and have therefore no interest in keeping our solar system going, which is why they pulled out. But with them gone, the parallel matrix of the parallel Earth has now been latched on and are now connecting with the fifth cycle. So those of us who are doing that one, we are also to be observant of these groupings because it's always a trinity structure in our reality. So we will have the transhuman agenda, we will have parallel Earth, and they are militaristic agenda, which is connected to the 1950 military projects because that's where that came from. So it's not good. And then we'll have the original ways of doing progression work and doing the transformation of our energy system to try and get out of here in whatever form we can. So that's the future that we are heading towards. But parallel Earth, point being, parallel Earth were not interested in Heliel and his falling angelics and full lights and what have you. So they, actually, it was 2 weeks ago? I have no sense of time because on the inside of reality, I have no sense of time. So whenever it was, doesn't matter. Was it last week? Was it 2 weeks ago? It was recently. They took him out. Literally. Chopped off his head. That was it. So he was the fueler of many of what was left of his soldiers, the falling angelics. So they are now effectively beginning to decline in energy. Let us put it this way, unless they are linking up with underworld forces and stuff to keep themselves alive in the humans that they are attached to. So that is going to be interesting. But their light bringer. And you know what I'm here saying, because Heliel has never been the light bringer for humanity. It's been the light bringer for his soldiers. Is no longer there. And what remains of the different factions that got stuck here in the angelic wars have left as well on both sides. I know that because I've been part of releasing the ones of what we call the good side, right? But they have been stuck in the underworld in different ways and forms due to some of the things Heliel did and some of the arrangements he made with what was left of some of the older type of deities under the Tothian regime. Anyways, again, history, it doesn't matter. But point being is that he was supposed to come in and have his time now, his 5-year cycle, and that has effectively been removed. So that means we are now jumping 5 years into the future. And that allows for parallel Earth to quickly get in and connect, because they were not supposed to be here until 5 years in the future when Heliel was done with his thing, because there are kind of rules of the cycles and laws of the cycles of things are unfolding. So that means a lot of the timelines he was supposed to, Heliel and his false light groups were supposed to play out with the new bringer of dawn, as they call themselves, and the new humanity that we're going to do what we could call different transition dynamics within our structures of society, the world, and how it's built up within business, and all these kind of things are now taking a different turn. That means that some of the things that were supposed to happen the next 5 years are now being expedited and jumped. These timelines are collapsing. So we are now latching on to the 5 year into the future timelines. And you remember a while back I talked about we are now entering into a new 5 year cycle where we would have to some degree, some ability to build something that would prepare us for the future to come. And we are now being deprived of that possibility. So that also means we are now in a different environment again. So for those of us who are doing the pioneering work, We need different abilities. We need different ways of adjusting to reality. And for now, just for those of you who are interested in following the methods and the sciences and the way I'm going to find solutions for this, you can find, I've got 2 branches now. We got the randygreen.1 website, that is the whole advanced psychotherapy. Well, I will work with the progression work, which is most the sciences and the teachings and the classes for that is done. I need a little bit of, I have got some course material out for the psychic energetic side of it, how to work with your psychological structure in terms of the 5th cycle. So what I will come up with there with the psychic energetic self-healing and psychic energetic inner work will be tailored for the 5th cycle. What do we need to do when we enter the 5th cycle? How do we need to adjust our psychological structure? What are the things we need to do when we work with our personality matrix? So even though I talk about the inner child, or I talk about some of the things that you know from the 4th cycle and what's been out there in the spiritual community and psychological work for a long time, that's not what I'm going to talk about. I'm going to begin to create that type of sciences and that kind of work and energy work that we need to do, those of us who are going to be the pioneer for the 5th cycle. So I'm no longer focusing on the 4th cycle. Those of you who are still stuck in the 4th cycle, you do the progression work and learn to alter your energy system to link up to the 5th cycle. That's what I can offer to all of you. That's why I've been focusing on the progression work. To begin with, you will also find that on the HAL Academy website. Which I'll link to this channel. So you just click on my website and you will get there. And now I've removed the whole Project Online magazine as well as the Otherworldly Sciences. And I'm now going to do the Otherworldly Sciences on the HAL Academy. So whatever we need of sciences for those of us who are doing the 5th cycle, that's where I will begin my work for those of you who are now jumping on board the 5th cycle and the 2025 timeline. We are now prepping and getting ready to be able to exist within this reality in the future that is to come. And that is similarly, as you can say, well, there's been a lot of people out there talking about prepping for different disasters, which means that they have done a lot of physical work. They have built their houses to be able to withstand whatever. They have got storages of all sorts of cans of foods and water and what have you. That's the physical thing. Now we are beginning to work with what's the psychological structure? What kind of resilience do you need to get ready to go into this future? That's where I'm going to focus as a psychotherapist, and one that's been working with realities that are now entering this phase that we are entering into. This is where I have my professionality, so to speak. I'm this kind of person that comes in and shuts down the original True Human projects. Once they enter into this cycle, then I come in, so to speak, and shut down the different technologies that belong to the True Human world so they can be pulled out. And then whatever is left will go into its natural decay cycles as it's supposed to, because to put it a little bit brutally, when the horse is dead, it's dead. No matter how much you flunk it, you cannot bring it back to life. It must run, things must run their course. Once the viability is gone, there is no further continuation for that system. So what needs to be done then is some other types of energy works, some other forms of acceptance, and some other psychological features need to come and play in whoever remains in that system so that they are ready to do the elevation or shift out of that reality and move into viable realities where they can continue under the original laws of the progressive humans. The humanoids are doing the same thing. So there are different ways of working with this, but there is another little thing that those of you who are doing this type of work that have put a very high degree of value into the solar rishis, they have left as well. So that's one of the things that really made me sad, because if they are gone, that means that's bad, because they were kind of the last overseers of the Syrian councils that were here. And if they're gone as well, then we are effectively running out of time. Let me just put it this way. And this is not doomsday. This is just, we are now entering into a new type of cycle of what it means to exist on this planet, and what it means to be an eternal human, and what it means to leave a system that no longer holds any progression possibilities, that no longer has the viability to get back onto its feet and continue as part of the elevation cycles, but are now effectively going into what remains of the last phases of a system that is going into what we call the pralaya state, or into that state where it will cease to exist. And since it is the end cycle, that is not pralaya, it is effectively going, everything that will continue will be pulled out, as we saw it with the sun, and everything else will go into its decay and evaporation and cease to exist, as we see it with stars in our universe. As they burn out, they turn into neutron stars, and eventually they explode and evaporate and turn into stellar dust, which will then float around in the universe and create for a short period of time whatever's left of viability, and this dust will create some kind of system that technically is not really viable, does not hold the potentials for life, but they will still create a new type of star or a new type of planet, but it will not be viable for life force because it has no viable networks and no viable racial grid. So it's just, as we're seeing it in Mars and other planets in our solar system, it's just matter energy, it's just dust energy that has accreted and has an environment because of the third cycle energies that technically are intelligent and does have potentials to create information systems, as well as, when I say information, I'm talking about information, as you know, as kind of code systems, but it's also inform system that are built upon specific type of third cycle code systems, which is what the spatial energies are capable of doing. They can create spaces, but they cannot hold any life forms. And that's part of the third cycle. And that's why it's not good to be part of the third cycle, because the third cycle is no longer holding consciousness potentials. It only holds the potentials for what is left of information systems in energy in itself, which we are seeing in the atom features, as well as quantum sciences and what have you, that our planet is made of. So the last ones that are keeping our planet viable and functional are humans on it, and you can connect the dots there. So for those of us that are going to do the Forerunner, and that's where I will talk in the years to come. So those of you who are still in the fourth cycle, I can recommend doing the progression work courses I have made for that purpose. I've been working very hard to get that completed, so you have a go-to place to get the information you need to complete your cycle. It's there. It's in the progression work courses, as well as in the whole perception logs. And then when you're ready, you can begin to embark on the fifth cycle, information systems and classes, which I will begin to create shortly and focus on as much as I can, because either way, things are going as they're going. So we are going to play on many different levels of what we can do to earn an income and figure out ways to, is it possible to build businesses in this kind of new environment? What businesses should we invest in? And all of these kind of things, which are part of the Forerunner material for the 2025 timeline. This is a complete new set of thinking about reality. So that's going to be a huge 90-degree turn for many of us that have been inside this type of work for a long time, including me, to do that 90-degree turn and learn to think in complete new ways when we are trying to solve some of the issues of the future. And what that means effectively in terms of what does it mean being human, what does it mean in terms of the institutions we have when we talk about cultural institutions, psychological institutions, how do we perceive ourselves, others, what are we to do, what can we do, what should we do, what is the triage of our reality, where do we need to focus, what do we need to be disciplined within, both self-discipline and maintaining our own energy system, maintaining everything we are, so we don't get sucked into the timelines that are connected to the cycles that are now effectively going into the devastation and are thereby being pulled backwards in time into evaporation and dustifying, and with that the loved ones and whatever we're seeing around us that are connected to these timelines, they will be marked by it, and you will be able to see it, which is also going to be a bit of a challenge of what we are to do there. So there's a lot of challenges that will come up. And these are some of the things I'm right now trying to tailor, as I'm always saying, I'm trying to do this and that, whatever. And then I work with it for a period of time, and then I get shut down, and then I'm quiet, and then I get back into the next month where we will have a new window of opportunity where I'll then try to pick up the pieces and continue the work that we are supposed to do. But that's the game. That's the problem with the many fallen timelines we have now that are now going into devastation, so that we have few windows where we effectively can do the work that we need to do. So that's also part of the resilience and the new efficiency that we need to develop to be able to do the pioneering work, that we must understand that there are days where we can work and days where we can't work. So there's a lot of new things that we need to put in play to be able to do the pioneering work and become the forerunners of the 2025 timeline. So with that one said, thank you for listening into this podcast. And until next time, take care. Get ready for whatever is coming. Decide which time are you going to be on, and what is your physicality, what's your structure, what's your capacities, what are you capable of doing? Are you just to focus on completing the 4th cycle and do whatever you can to get out through the old gate systems that are connected to the 4th cycle? Or do you have what it takes to jump into the 5th cycle and live by the sciences, live by the discipline, live by the energy work, live by the complications, and live by the challenges that will be demanded for those of us who are getting ready to continue the last phases on this planet and in this solar system, to ensure that as many as possible will be able to do the transition. Thank you.